So I used to be an ambulance operator, and it was probably one of the most stressful times of my life. I became one when I was 19 years old, and during training, I had to learn how to use map books instead of GPS. And the reason why is because if for some reason our electronics didn't work, we still needed to know how to navigate our way to the hospital. And one time during one of my very first shifts, we had someone dying in the back of our ambulance, and my training officer was in the back with the patient. And my job was to drive as fast as I could to the hospital, but despite the fact that I've already been there a few times, I actually forgot how to get there. And I remember being in front of a traffic light, and I had no idea if I had to turn left or right, and my training officer was yelling at me to hurry up, and I prayed at that moment, God, please lead me to the hospital. And having no idea where I was going, I just turned left. But praise God, we still got to the hospital, and in just a few minutes. My training officer was upset that I took the longer route, but I was just glad that I got there. One of the things that stressed me out the most about the job was having to memorize all the highways, freeways, and main streets. So back when I worked as an EMT, I got assigned to different stations across LA and Orange County in Southern California. And if you didn't know, that area is full of cities and it's always busy. So depending on which city or what the patient's injuries were would determine which hospital that I went to. On top of that, not all hospitals are the same because some hospitals are smaller and didn't have a trauma unit that you could take patients to. So I needed to know which hospital was the correct hospital to take patients all the time. And this was just directions. On top of that, I needed to stay up to date with my medical knowledge and remember how to treat wounds and people with strokes and heart attacks and such. On top of that, I had to work 24-hour shifts, so I was tired almost all the time. Back when I worked a lot, I had 70 to 80-hour work weeks, and my work week started on Fridays, and I'd get into work around 6 a.m. and get off at 6 p.m., but my shifts almost always went over. Then the next day on Saturday, I'd work 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. the next day on Sunday. And back then, I remember still making it to church at around 8 a.m., and I'd be dead tired. But after a quick nap after church, I then needed to prepare for my 1 p.m. shift. So on Sundays, I worked from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then the next morning, I'd work one final 24-hour shift from 6 a.m. Monday to 6 a.m. on Tuesday. And on my first day off on Tuesday, I pretty much slept the entire day. And then Wednesday, I'd have a full 24 hours to do whatever I wanted. And then on Thursday, I'd essentially just dread going to work the next day. Oh, and another thing when you're an EMT, there's normally two types of calls that you can run. 911s, where someone called 911 and they need help immediately, so you have to drive fast with lights and sirens. And IFTs. And IFT stands for interfacility transports, and all you do is transport patients from hospital to care facility or vice versa. Normally, these calls are pretty boring and safe because all you have to do is pick up a patient and then drop them off, but sometimes they can be bad. One time I got called to a senior care facility and we needed to drop off a patient to a clinic, but after looking closely at their vitals and symptoms, it turns out that they were actually having a stroke, and we had to rush and drive them to a nearby hospital. And I remember me and my partner were so angry at the people who worked at the facility because here they had a dying person in a room, and if they just knew what they were doing, they would send them to a hospital sooner. And I remember it was here that I started getting a sense of how bad people can get. Mind you, this was my first job ever, and day after day, I'd see a bunch of elderly people in these care facilities getting zero care. And in Southern California, they're everywhere. And while there were some good facilities where the staff knew what they were doing, there were also a lot of bad ones. One red flag that I saw often was patients having these bed sores like underneath them. And it happens when a patient is sitting too long and they're not repositioned very often or looked at on a regular basis. And after seeing tons of neglected patients across multiple cities and all these different care facilities, I don't know, but it made me feel depressed. However, there were some happy moments during my time as an EMT. I remember there was this one 911 call and a man was having a heart attack, and I remember everything happening very fast. But after we rushed him to the hospital and hooked him up to everything, I remember walking away and looking back at him to make sure he was okay. And he smiled this weak smile and gave me a thumbs up despite the fact that he was dying, and he said thank you. And honestly, it's moments like those that reminded me why I still wanted to be an EMT. But it was still too stressful for me, so I quit after 7 months. But just because I didn't work as an EMT anymore doesn't mean that I never used my medical skills. So this was years ago, but I remember driving back home from church and I saw a car crash on the freeway with a downed motorcycle and people on the floor. And it took up 3 lanes on the freeway, and highway patrol or fire didn't respond yet. So I pulled over, made sure I was safe, and I approached the motorcyclist on the floor. And then I held C-spine, which means I held their head to prevent further neck injury, and I ran my assessment. And thankfully, the guy was alert and oriented and was able to answer my questions. And as he was, I saw lights and sirens from the fire department, so I started telling him that the fire department was here and that he was gonna be okay. So once the fire department came, I let go of his head and I started saying goodbye to him. And then he grabbed my hand and in a choked up voice, he said, "Thank you so much." And holding his hand, I told him, "You're welcome," and that he'll be okay. And after that, I stood up, gave the fire captain a quick report, and I was on my way. And it's moments like these that I think every person should get their EMT. It's actually something I'll be forcing my future kids to do. And the reason why is because I think everyone should know how to help someone if a situation ever called for it. So if you don't know CPR or basic first aid, I will now be attempting to persuade you to get some kind of medical certification. And my attempt will be in the form of one last story, and it's the reason why I became an EMT. Back when I was 17 years old, I was on the football team in high school. Our team wasn't that good, and we ended up losing our homecoming game. It was a Friday night, and my school was huge, so there were a ton of people. So after the game, I decided to take the long way to my car, and I stopped in front of the auditorium because my friends were there. And as I was talking to my friends, I heard these 3 pops, like pop, pop, pop. And at first I thought they may have been gunshots, but I've been shooting before and for some reason it just didn't sound the same. And as I was thinking about what it was, I saw 3 guys jogging past me and they were all laughing. So I thought that they played some prank and threw firecrackers or something. But about 10 or so seconds later, an old man runs up to me and starts yelling. And I had to calm him down a bit because I couldn't understand him. But then he started making sense. And he was screaming, "Where did those guys go? They shot the girl." And my heart sank because I realized I was wrong. And I don't know why, but my body moved on its own and I ran after those 3 guys. And I sprinted and I thought that I needed to bring these men to justice, like they were laughing, and I knew my window to catch them was small. So I run in the middle of the intersection to stop traffic and I start yelling and asking people in their cars if they saw the 3 guys. And after about 2 minutes of looking like a crazy person, I knew my window to find them was gone. And as I started walking back to the auditorium, the police already set up a perimeter and they redirected me. So I drove home and I prayed that God would let the girl who got shot live. And I almost remember getting in an accident on the way home because I was crying so much. And when I did get home, I turned on the TV and I saw my school on the news. And soon I found out that the girl who got shot was a sophomore who went to my school, and she passed away that night. When I went back to school after the weekend, everyone was dressed in black, and the school offered therapy sessions for students who needed it. And people like me, who were witnesses, were brought in for questioning. Actually, a ton of my friends were mad at me because they found out that I ran after the killers. And after asking me why I'd do such a dumb thing, I said I didn't know, and that it just felt like it was the right thing to do. And the reason why I'm sharing this story with you is because this was the one time in my life when I felt completely helpless. I ran after those guys just because my body automatically responded. But knowing what I know now, I would have ran towards the girl instead, and just maybe I would have been able to stop the bleed sooner, and that would have upped her chances of survival. But I didn't, and I honestly wished I did. So yeah, after feeling useless and not knowing what to do that day, I decided to become an EMT after I graduated high school so that if anything like this happened in my life again, I'd know what to do. So yeah, there's my sad little story on why I became an EMT. And if I were to connect all of this to a Bible verse, I would use James chapter 4, verse 14, where it says, "For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." And the reason why I use this verse is because one of the things I learned quickly in my experience with the shooters and my training as an EMT is that death is a lot closer than we realize. So my encouragement to you today is to try to enjoy your life and the lives of people around you. Because as this passage says, life is a vapor, and you don't know when it'll be the last time you'll get to see someone. So spend less time on your phone and more time with people that you love. Oh, and while you're at it, get medically certified, okay? So I hope you learned a little bit from my experiences, and I also hope that you remember today that Jesus loves you. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe because it helps us a ton. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. God bless.